Hey everybody. In this video we'll learn about generating and testing hypotheses as a strategy, and we'll take a look at the Explain Everything app as a way to work with the strategy. Just as a reminder, in our layout of the 9 strategies, generating and testing hypotheses falls in that third category of extending and applying knowledge. So as we look at this app, and look at this strategy, we'll really focus on the idea of the mental processes, the metacognition that goes with this, that as students are generating questions, generating predictions, testing those predictions, that this is all good learning about learning. So a couple of the recommendations we're going to talk about in a second here, in terms of classroom practice, is that the teacher should be coming up with structured tasks for students to do around generating and testing hypotheses, and then that there's a lot of power in the action of students explaining hypotheses, and it's even the idea of explanation and explain as a key word here. That's one of the reasons that we really like this app, Explain Everything, as an example to show. So a little bit more about this strategy. Um, So really, this is about reasoning. This is about asking what if questions. So the research talks about the power of making testing predictions, about students kind of weighing different options for how to test those predictions, and then the again the metacognition behind explaining what their conclusions are. Um, in terms of those recommendations for classroom practices and coming up with structured tasks, some of the recommendations there include the teacher modeling the processes that students might follow, basing it on familiar content, as always, giving guidance, providing graphic organizers. Those sorts of scaffolds are always helpful. We won't go into this in great detail, but for the processes that you might follow, um, include doing a system analysis, so looking at the relationship between parts and whole, and the interactions of those two elements in a system. Taking a problem-solving approach where you're trying to address something that's missing. You're trying to overcome a limitation or a constraint. Um, excuse me. The experimental inquiry approach. So in this process, you're collecting data, you're making an observation, and you're testing what that means. So an example of that might be a weather or an environmental observation where you're looking at erosion patterns and predicting what water is going to do in a given landscape, that sort of thing. And then finally, investigation. So this might be something where you're trying to solve a mystery. You're trying to come up with an answer to an unanswered question about the past, or it could even be a future prediction. But an example of this might be looking back in history and different perspectives on the role of Christopher Columbus. From the indigenous perspective, from the Western European perspective. Um, the second classroom practice to pay attention to is asking students to explain what it is that they've learned or what they've tested. And this is where we'll focus our model demonstration here. But some examples of that might be structuring their work, giving them templates, frames for how they explain what they're going to do, or what they've done. Um, Giving them some sort of a presentation or notebook option that might include audio or video. Um, Things like that, and even down to a community event where they might be sharing what it is that they have what they've investigated. So we'll jump in a second here to Explain Everything. And Explain Everything is a $2.99 app. There are other free apps that will do similar things, but we like this one because it combines a number of functions. So it has the whiteboard function that you're probably familiar with from something like Show Me or EduCreations, which are free apps. Um, what we like about Explain Everything is that it lets you sequence a number of those pages or whiteboards together, and so you can create almost a slide deck or a notebook effect. And it also lets you do voiceover audio recording, so you can. So this is a really nice way for students to explain their reasoning behind their hypothesis. So let's take a look. So this is my 5-year-old, and we asked the question for our purposes today whether the hypothesis we wanted to test was whether a straight edge pencil, an edged pencil, would roll further, or whether a round pencil with no edges would roll further. So we collected some documentation and we talked through the process. So we kind of took a science notebook approach to that. So here was us posing the question.
So which one do you think is going to roll farther? The one that's round or the one that has edges?
The one that's round.
Why?
Because it has round bouncy balls. I figured out bounce farther and roll farther than the bouncy balls that have the sides. And they can only bounce, not very far.
Okay.
So then we moved on and asked about how we might test the hypothesis.
So how do you think we can test this out? How can we test this hypothesis?
Well, my test hypothesis idea is to do it.
So how can we do it?
Well, see that ramp you made?
Mm-hmm.
I think we could put these pencils on that ramp, and then let them roll down.
And see which one goes the furthest?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So we did that. So we had already made the ramp, and so we did a number of trials, and Finn took some notes here. You could see that we had a tape measure all set up, and then we talked through the results.
So was your hypothesis right, that the round one would roll further?
Almost.
So what did you learn?
Well, I learned the middle time we tested that the edge side, the one with edges, it went farther.
And what did you learn from that?
Well, I learned that rolling one went pretty far, but that one went almost even farther.
What did it do the other 2 times?
The other 2.
So you can see we talked through a little bit of some of the anomalous results, and he had some overall impressions. So you can see that this would be a way for you to on the spot, you can capture some documentation of your process, and you can have an after the fact discussion or reflection on what took place. So that is generating and testing hypotheses and Explain Everything. So we look forward to seeing your ideas.